Hi, guys. Hello, hello. I always open these with the same kind of greeting with a happy hello. I guess that's just my go to thing. I really, really am glad that you guys are here, and I cannot thank you enough for all the support. I'm getting closer and closer to my goal of having 100 likes and subscribes. And I am so excited that you guys have decided to trust the content that I'm putting on here and the collaborations between Dr. Becky and I. And it just means the world to me. And I just need to ask a favor that you continue to support, to like, to share, all of those things, because I'm planning on doing big things with this. And I feel that this is part of the journey that I'm on in this life, and it's the plan that God has laid out for me, and I take it very seriously. And along this journey that I'm on is my own healing. And that to me means everything, to be able to heal my own wounds, whether it's childhood wounds or wounds that have been accumulated over time to get me to where I am today at this ripe old age. So thank you, thank you. I can't thank you enough. And gratitude is everything. And I believe that the first thing that we need to do every single day before we set our feet down on the ground from our beds is thank God. List three things that you're grateful for. And that sets the tone for the day. And I hope that it makes a difference for you, because it sure does for me. Life can get crazy. Life can get stressful. Tragedies happen. Sad things happen. And this week has been particularly hard for me. And I just know that if I don't base the start of my day in gratitude, then the whole thing is just shifted in a negative way. Anyway, that's my little tidbit for today. The episode I'm dropping today is part of another 2-part series with Dr. Becky Woolery. And it's one that, again, every one of these, I say this every time, but it's the truth. Every one of these episodes that we dive into together is essentially her bringing her expertise, her experiences, and her knowledge about that particular subject to the table for the general population, but also in turn, it's therapy for me. And the way that I see things with what my goal is with this is that when she can basically give me some online therapy in front of you all, it's kind of knocks down the barriers for the relatability and for you to just think, oh my God, I totally get it. And that's what this whole thing's about for me. So I know I'm not the only one that has been through what I've been through. And also, I'm not the only one that's on a healing journey at this point in my life. So that's why I do what I'm doing. And I really hope that all this resonates with you. So again, this is part 1 of a 2-part series. And this one dives into generational trauma or intergenerational trauma and how it affects us from years above to infinity and beyond if we don't try to work through it, heal from it, and then change the patterns, be the disruptor, be the game changer, be the black sheep, be the cycle breaker. And that's what this one's about. We dive a little bit into birth order, but that I believe needs to have its own platform for another time. Anyway, guys, don't forget to find Dr. Becky on her own YouTube channel, Dear Dr. Becky. And thank you again. I can't thank you enough. Okay, here we go, girl.
Here we are.
All right. Hello,
Hey
my
there.
friend again.
Hello.
How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Good.
Good to be here.
I'm awesome. It is good to have you as always, and I can't thank you enough for taking the time to sit and chat and bring all this great information and helpful tidbits into the world. And if we can help people with what we bring out, that is my goal. And I know it's yours as well, because that's just who you are. Yes. So
that's why we're doing
Dr.
this,
Becky Woolery.
right? That's why we're doing this.
It is. It is. It is, ma'am. And I always feel the need. I need to reintroduce you in case somebody hasn't seen any of our previous content. So if you want to just throw out there a little bit about who you are, then we'll just get rocking and rolling.
Well, and vice versa, right? If you're new here, you may not know either of us, but I'm Dr.
Mm-hmm.
Becky, and I have a degree in psychology, and I have a mental health agency and a podcast that I do. It's called Dear Dr. Becky, and I'm really just here to help people in their life journey and to walk that walk with them in any way that I can. So that's why part of the reason we are here today, and
Yes,
finding different topics that may benefit, frankly, us and you at the same time, right? That's the whole point. We want to be able
definitely.
to help everybody along their path, or whoever may need it.
Right. Absolutely. Well, thank you so much. And I don't need to take up time to say who I am if they want to know, whatever. I'm just
Whatever.
me. That's all,
You're just
whatever.
you. You're
Yeah.
just you.
I'm just me. I'm just me. And I
Oh,
am the
I
the
like just
person
you, so
fortunate
that's
enough to
good.
have this.
Stay just you.
Well, thank you. Thank you. I appreciate that. So, what we chose to talk about today is something that is just such an amazing topic. And we had mentioned previously that it's one of those subjects that people just I don't know if they make excuses
Mm,
for this as far as any type of behaviors or things they were raised with because it's just her, it's just how they
mm,
are, it's just the way it is. And what we're going to talk about is intergenerational trauma,
mm,
generational trauma. And I really want you to start us off with what your professional opinion is and your experience on the end of counseling with
mm,
this type of thing.
mm. It's a deep issue, and what you just said just resonates because I hear it many, many times over and over. It's just how I am. It's just how it is. And honestly, I really do think that a lot of that is just a lack of insight, a lack of understanding, a lack of awareness, right? Because frankly, it is how we are. We are born a certain way. We are exposed to certain things, which basically all of that, we talk about, we discuss all the time about nurture versus nature, right? And so it's that combination of genetics plus how we're raised in our environment, right? Nature and nurture is who we are,
Yeah.
and so therefore, I think many people just grow up thinking, well, this is how I am. This is my personality. This is how I was born, or this is a result of my environment, right? Which is true. I can't deny that there's not truth to that.
Right.
But you know what I always love to say? Anything about you, even these days, even the color of your eyes can be changed. So I think it's important to recognize that
Mm,
we have to have awareness first, though, and we have to have a desire and a motivation, right, to make the changes because there's nothing about us that we cannot change. No matter if it
yeah.
is your genetic personality, you can change your personality. There are all kinds of different approaches to being able to make the changes that can help you to have, frankly, a better life. So why would we not want that, really? Regardless of
Absolutely.
regardless of how we were made, right? Regardless if we were more influenced by nature or nurture, frankly. But that didn't specifically talk
Absolutely.
to generational trauma. We can go into that a little bit more because that is definitely part of it, right? That actually comes down to both nature and nurture. I'm just going to say one thing when we think about it, that when we look at the nurturing part, really, our families are our first classroom. They really are. And we never really graduate.
Yeah.
We never graduate from our families. True. Think about it. We never graduate from our
Oh,
families.
right. Yeah, that's interesting. Interesting way to look at it.
Yeah. And what do we learn? What do we learn in our families? Well, what are we supposed to learn compared to what do we learn? Something to think about.
Yeah.
Because honestly, that's a place where we first learn and understand things like safety and love and worthiness and how conflict works. and maybe what we deserve. And these things can get really wired into us before we even have the cognitive ability to question them, right? Because we're concrete thinkers when we're little. But by the time we're often old enough to think about those things critically, those lessons are just like facts. That's why I said when people state, hey, this is just how I am, I get it, because they are like facts. And
Yeah,
they're just really opinions that have been handed down from people who are flawed, because we are all flawed. And
absolutely.
trying to distinguish between what is really factual and what is not can be quite challenging if we don't have the awareness and the insight. So just some things to think about, maybe in a different way.
Absolutely. It is crazy though that when even it forms even in our mother's womb that there could be traumatic events that happen that are absorbed, epigenetics, everything changes in so many ways. And there's so many things being flooded into our system as we're growing a human inside of us. The lack of resources, the lack of food, PTSD in our own parents and family lineage, that's all being absorbed as we are in our mother's womb. And then we are born into that, how we're taught to either deal or not deal or bury those things. And it's just, there's so many moving parts with it when you start to dive into it, and then expect us all to walk around normal and function and not pass things down, learn behaviors, stress, all these things, pass those down to our kids. It's like, okay, who's going to be at some point the cycle breaker to all this stuff? Who's going to take these things and turn it inward and go, okay, I'm not going to be the one that says, well, I'm German, so I'm full of anger. Germans are angry, or
Right, right.
I'm Irish, and Irish are
Yeah,
passionate, and Italians, it's all this,
right.
but it's a lot of learned behavior
It is.
that can, like you said, it can change. If you want to change it, you can change it. So it's crazy when you start to kind of scratch beneath the surface and go, oh, so I don't have to be this way. Oh,
Yeah.
I don't have to react the same way that my mother did or my dad did or my grandfather or whatever it is that you feel is what is ingrained in you, and you just need to just break that cycle. I just find it completely fascinating. And so that brings a question to mind, Dr. Becky. In
Yeah.
your history and
hmm
practice as far as therapy goes and counseling, are there any particular moments that come to mind when that's the first thing that popped into your head as you're speaking with somebody that's going through their history, trying to figure out, why do I do this? Why does this happen? Or whatever, that you think, boom, generational trauma,
Yeah.
intergenerational. I mean, can you give examples?
Oh, it happens like all the time. And I think a really
Okay.
common way it expresses itself is when somebody walks into the office and they'll say, I don't know why I do this. I hear that a lot. I'm not really sure why I'm like
Bing.
I am. They're just kind of feeling stuck. They're frustrated. They're feeling stuck. They're really thinking, and they recognize they don't like this. They don't like their own personal patterns and why they're doing what they're doing. And that is
Mm.
always fascinating to me, because I love, frankly, it's fascinating because I can see that they really have this strong passion and desire. And individuals that are like that in my session, I know they're going to do the work because they want to
Mm.
know. They want to know and they want to change, but they don't know how to. They're just stuck and they don't know how to. And so they think that if they can understand that, then they can change, which there is a lot of truth to that. Absolutely. And so I say, okay, so now here's the thing. I'm going to back up for just a second. I'm going to tell you
Okay.
my common response when I hear that in particular. My common response is, you're absolutely right. If we can dig down and help find out, maybe why you do the things that you do, why you think this way, why you behave this way, et cetera, then it can help massively, because you're basically armed with information, and now you can identify specific ways that can help you, right? That is really the
Yeah.
first thing that I typically tell people. But now here's a caveat to this. I will also say, but if you're like Freud, because he was all about doing psychodynamic theory and working on histories and understanding why people did what they did. I said, we could spend a year on this. We could spend 10 years on this. We could spend massive amounts of time trying to uncover why you are the way you are. And of course, oftentimes we will just have a basic conversation about the fact that it's a combination of, genetics and environmental factors, right?
Mm-hmm.
But I'm like, but let's dig down. Let's see if we can find it. But we're only going to spend a short time trying to find out why you are the way you are. Because one thing I have learned in working with people is they can figure out exactly why they do what they do. But here's the caveat. It doesn't mean that they will change what they do. So it's right. It's fascinating to
Yeah.
me how many people do get to a point where they understand why they do what they do, even if they understand the history, the genetics of it, how it was an environmental, how it was learned, whatever the case may be. Maybe it could be a situation that impacted them in the way that they think and they feel, and it's just stayed with them forever, right? So they get
Mm-hmm.
to understand that, which is great, but it doesn't mean it's going to change anything. That's just the first
Yeah.
step, is the awareness. And so my favorite response to that is, frankly, well, but if you know that it's a problem right now, why don't we just work on changing it?
Mm-hmm.
We can work in the moment. We can work on changing it. We can identify ways that can help you to change it. Well, understanding where it come from help, absolutely. But what will help the most is actually being intentional and acting on the problems and making changes. And I can help you walk down that path and figure out how to do that will work for you. Does that make sense, Tiffany?
Absolutely. 100%. I
That's
love that. I
okay.
love that because I think we can get hung up on the why.
Yes.
I
Mm-hmm.
mean, hugely hung up on the why. And I'm guilty of that, on the why. Not that I sit back and just hang on to it. I think it's because the way my brain works is the why is huge for me. The why, because I'm so
Sure.
curious and I really want to
Absolutely.
know if there's an answer as to my questions of why. That helps me come back to, okay, I got it. Okay, now I can move forward. I get it. Makes sense to me. Now I can move forward and figure out how to work on it and let's fix this. So
Yeah.
I love that, but I love that that's your approach in that, because if it were me walking into your office, your room, and say, I'm a mess. I don't know why I did this. I don't understand this. Help me. Help me. Help me, please, Dr. Becky. And then you say to me, okay, tell me a little bit about your history, what's going on, whatever. And you get that why, and you tell me the why. And I'm like, oh, duh. Okay, that's great, but let's move on. We know this, but let's fix you. We
Exactly.
don't care about this stuff. There's nothing you can do about that stuff, right?
It's true. We can't go back and change the past, but what we can do is we can impact the present, which will then impact the future, which will then, in a sense, change everything, right? Which is
Yeah.
really the ultimate goal. But where we have power is in the present. That's just the fact. Where we have power is
Yeah.
in the present. And I absolutely get it, Tiffany. I need to know. I'm always asking questions, right? I need to know. There's such a desire to understand and to know. And sometimes that simple acknowledgement of, oh, this is why this happened. Okay, that can be so validating, and it can just feel like such a relief. And it can cause just a sense of peace for a lot of people, because
Mm.
sometimes people are just extremely hard on themselves. And when we can recognize that, wait a minute, this isn't me. Maybe
Yeah.
it's just the result of the situation. Right.
Mm.
That is a whole different way of framing things, because we oftentimes
Absolutely.
just think somehow there's something wrong with me. There's something wrong with me. And then when we can look at the bigger picture and we can understand that, wait a second, there's all these different factors that come into play. I need to give myself a little more grace. And
Mm.
sometimes a simple thing like that can be so powerful, right? We don't have to do anything any further. So it really just depends on what the situation is and what people are needing and striving and what they need to have changed in their life. Maybe it's a better relationship. Maybe it's self-esteem, for example, why it is that they're seeking the answers that they are seeking. But many times they can work again in the present on improving their self-esteem, on improving communication. But I definitely agree. It's good to look at what influences the reason that we do the things we do or think the way we do, right? Definitely helpful.
Yeah.
And I'm just going to back up to kind of summarize a little bit of what you said earlier, because of intergenerational trauma is a perfect example of how many things are impacting us. And yet we somehow just think we are the issue, right? That's so true. Somehow I
Right.
am just the issue, or what's wrong with me? I hear that so commonly. I'm not saying that you
Mm.
state that. It's just a common thing that
No,
I
right.
hear in sessions,
Sure.
right? But frankly, trauma can be transmitted. Everybody has trauma in their life in some way or the other, right? And oftentimes it just depends on how we handle the trauma.
Mm.
But if we don't handle it in very healthy ways, and frankly, even when we try to handle it in healthy ways, trauma is still going to impact us. That's just a fact. It's going to impact us. It's going to
Yeah.
change us. And it can be transmitted to other people behaviorally, like through modeling or the emotional climate, right, of what they might be going through. And of course,
Mm.
another thing then that can be impacted by that is the attachment patterns. But they are often inherited relationally. I think that's a huge part of that intergenerational trauma and something you were talking about. And then also the unprocessed, sometimes grief that people go through when they've experienced trauma, that can alter family systems. And then I just have to
Mm.
touch on what you talked about epigenetics, because that's something I think a lot of people don't understand. And I'm going to try to make it simple. I'm going to try.
Good.
Epigenetics,
Good.
it's not about it's not that trauma is going to actually change your genes, but there's a huge research that is called the ACE studies. I don't know if you've heard of the ACEs. People always like to ask, hey, where are you on the ACE scale? And if you're really high on the
Oh,
ACE scale,
I've
have you
heard
heard
that.
of it? Okay, that means that you've gone through massive amounts of trauma. I worked with somebody just this week who walked in and said, this is my ACE score. It was out the roof. It was crazy out the roof how
Oh.
much trauma this individual had. But, and that trauma can be a lot of different things. It can be a combination of anything from violence that has occurred to somebody, to abuse, to accidents that they may have gone through, to experiencing, watching other people's trauma, right? There's
Right.
just so many things that trauma impacts. But what epigenetics shows, that there's stress markers that can influence our gene expression. It's not the gene that changes, it's how it is expressed. And to give you a simple,
Mm.
I think, a simple analogy, it's like, you walk into this house here and there are light switches everywhere. And maybe, just maybe, my laundry room is a real big mess, right? So if I'm going to go into my laundry room, I'm going to flip that light switch on so I can see and not trip over everything. I'm going to be a little
And
bit
not
more,
true.
right? I don't want to trip over everything. So I'm going to turn that light switch on. I'm going to be a little bit more vigilant in my laundry room than maybe other rooms in my house. So that is really what epigenetics is about. It's about all these different gene expressions. So in other words, some are switched on and some are switched off. So if we're going through trauma, guess which ones we're likely to switch on? We're likely to switch on that fight, flight, freeze system. And so that laundry room, I'm going to flip that switch on because I have to be more vigilant. I have to be more aware. I have to be more on guard when I walk into that room because of what I'm experiencing. That's really kind of a really brief, I guess, analogy of what epigenetics might look like. I just want to clarify
Yeah.
it's not the genes changing, but it is definitely how they're expressed. And then that is what gets passed down and from one generation to the other. Because if it's expressed that
Interesting.
way from one family to the next, you can only imagine you're in this hypervigilant kind of state, potentially, right? So I just wanted to
Yeah.
express that. We, as
I
we
appreciate
mentioned,
that.
yeah, just to make it easier to understand, we don't just inherit our eye color. We inherit things like coping styles and emotional tolerances and unfinished grief
Or intolerances.
or intolerances. Yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah.
emotional dysregulation for sure.
Yes, absolutely. Yes. And it's interesting how when you're open to think on this broad and wide scale about why, and
Mm,
again, it takes curiosity and the willingness to find the answers and to own the answers and
mhm,
to acknowledge the answers and make changes. It's amazing once you start to go down that rabbit hole what comes to the surface and what you
mm,
start to learn about why am I like this? Why
mm.
is she like that? Why are my siblings like this? And why? That's just me across the
The
board.
why,
And when
whys.
those
Yep, the
people,
whys.
yes, absolutely, 100%. And I know I'm not the only one, obviously. I mean, it's why somebody comes to you for help. It's why they
All
want
the way, all the
to
time.
buy the
Yeah.
self-help books and go to the seminars. And this is a huge thing now too, that we're all trying to figure things out about ourselves now more than ever. And I love that movement that's going on. It's the information is readily available, just like you with your podcast and your tidbits that you put out there to help people on YouTube. You are one of tens of thousands of people in that
Sure.
are at your profession level that are doing this, and it's beautiful because we can seek out that help and find that information
Yeah.
without having to go anywhere anymore, right? So I
Yeah.
love that. And what comes out of it is fascinating to me because the answers may not be what you thought, and
Mhm.
it enlightens you in ways that you never thought, oh well, that makes sense because my father was packing around
Mm,
trauma that his mother gave to him and learned
mhm,
that, and his coping mechanisms and skills or lack thereof is what made him who he is. And that bled down into us kids. And you look at my mother with her
mm,
traumas before she
mm,
was ever born, and then from her parents down, and their inability to cope or inability to show up
yeah.
or deal with things or be present and emotionally open and nurturing, that came from her
Mm,
upbringing. And but yet those two together brought some interesting dynamics into what made us kids. And I just find it fascinating that I can dive in as far as I can go on myself. But then the
mm,
nuggets that I find occasionally answer those questions as to
mm,
why my mom is this way, why my
mm,
dad is this way, why the siblings ended up being what they were. And we bleed into birth order
mhm,
on top of that. So the parents that the older siblings got at 17 years old, mind you, my parents were 17 when they had their
mm.
firstborn, being
Yeah.
kids, having kids, and then all the other factors of their generational crap they're packing around, trying to, basically in trauma. Because I think it has to be, because I can't speak of it myself. Being a teenage parent has to
Mm,
bring its own trauma into the mix of the stress of dropping out of school, trying to live their life. I don't know how to
mm,
cook. I'm not sure how to do this. I don't know how to do that. Going back and forth between parents, looking for help, being broke, not being able to really deal with things emotionally and mentally and to cope with it because they're not getting the guidance and the love and the nurturing from their parents. I mean, it's just this, my brain explodes, man. I'm telling you, it's no wonder that the shit that happened in my family happened because neither parent was equipped to cope with their own stuff. They just hit the ground running. My dad worked. My mom did what she did, trying to raise kids and be the wife. And the only life she's ever known was loving my father. If you ask her, well, that's not true because there's so much there that's completely just in a box and put away and never to be seen, heard, or dealt with ever. So it's just so crazy when you go down this rabbit hole. And that's just the way my brain works. I don't know if there's anybody else that has experienced this kind of thing in the search for answers like me. But after all that rambling, what are your thoughts?
I think there's a lot there, and I appreciate your search for answers because I think it really does help us understand ourselves, life better, our family. One of the most powerful things that I've seen, frankly, is what you just stated. And that is where I've had a lot of people that come in and they're really angry and frustrated with their parents. And then they, because of multiple reasons, right? But then they really take a deep dive into their parents' life. And I ask them, so how was life like for your parents, right? And they start really thinking about it and spending some time understanding that, okay, now I know maybe why my parents are like the way they did. They may be emotionally disconnected from me. They maybe haven't been able to show me love in the way that would be helpful for me, that would feel good for me, right? And I heard you say that for yourself. That's tough. That's tough, Tiffany. But one thing that they do learn is they learn a little bit more empathy and compassion for their parents because they can say, well, at least I didn't get beat up like they did, for example, right? I've heard that many times. At least they did better, frankly, than their parents did. I've heard that almost every single time. Almost every single time I work with somebody who are really struggling with their parents and how they treated them or raised them or whatever the case may be. If they look back at how their parents were raised or how their parents were treated, 9 out of 10 times they will tell me that their parents did much better than their own parents did. And that changes. It's like this flip changes in their brain that like, wait a second, I need to be a little bit more compassionate and have a little more empathy. And now I understand. It doesn't change. It doesn't excuse. I just want to say it doesn't excuse, bad things, bad behavior. And it clearly doesn't change what happened, right? Nothing's going to change what happened. But once you have that understanding and the empathy, it can provide peace, forgiveness, all kinds of things that can really help us to move forward. So I definitely get the importance of exploring the whys, and I'm a big exploring the whys person too. And if you can explore the whys and understand it, and then it can help you to feel better and have peace about what's happened. I think that is just super powerful. And when you were talking to just now, there's so many pieces. It's sometimes there's so many pieces here that it's not just, birth order is huge. Absolutely. And there's a lot of research around. I love Adler's work around birth order. You think about the difference between the first child and the last child and the middle child, right? There's a lot of differences, but there's also generational differences just in when people grow up in certain generations. Like if you see people who grew up, for example, during the Depression era, and they were all about, they were so limited, they didn't have food. And so then they may be raising their family with like, oh, you can't eat too much, or we need to save everything. And of course, then people, the way you perceive it is like, wait, am I eating too much? Are we not doing well? Do I have to be vigilant and worried about this all my life? Right? Because then they tend to worry about those things because that's how their parents were. They worried about those things. And that's hence how it becomes intergenerational, right? And that's really what we're talking about today is intergenerational trauma. But I also do want to point out one last thing. Again, there's so many pieces to this that I think it's important to recognize that a lot of things that people experience in their life they don't see as traumatic, and it's true because they're not for them. It's really we know that frankly humans are resilient. They're able to get through things, they're able to move on, and so they don't really see it as traumatic. They honestly just see a lot
Mm,
of those things as just normal life occurrences, right? And
right.
so I do like to point out that what is traumatic for one person isn't necessarily traumatic for another person, because sometimes it just is how we understand it, it's how we perceive it, it's what we do with it.
Mm,
So
yeah.
just wanted
Yeah.
to mention that.
I appreciate any added tidbits that you can put in there to help people understand different aspects of what we're talking about. And so unpacking all of it is important no matter which direction it goes, because what I experienced growing up with my parents wasn't the same as what
Mm-hmm.
the older siblings experienced.
Yeah.
Like Dr. Gabor Mate says it very
Yes.
well, that you didn't have the same parents,
Mm-mm.
even though they were the same people, you didn't have the same parents. And
Oh
so,
yeah.
that's interesting because that's where birth order definitely comes in a lot of ways when you're dealing with the 17-year-old parents who were just in a whirlwind of stuff trying to deal with, oh crap, we're going to have kids. Well, let's get married. We'll make a family and this is what we're doing.
Right,
And
right, right.
the tools, the tools and lack thereof at the same time, they were not the same people. And then when I came along, I wasn't planned.
Mm,
They were done having babies. They had
mm,
already lost two by then. The
mm,
rainbow baby was born and he was the
mm.
golden child. And then it was like, okay, we're done. Mom had been pregnant 5 times by the time I came along, with
Wow.
two being one full term that didn't come home, that died after birth,
Oh
and
my
one
gosh.
miscarriage. So that's trauma, fear, anxiety. I can't even imagine what the house felt like
Yeah, right.
after everybody during that time. The baby's coming. There's a baby being born, and this one was gonna be the rainbow baby after the first loss, and
Mm,
so this one was gonna be that one that made everybody feel better, because I'm sure the
oh,
house was already full of trauma and stress. And then mom goes to the hospital, dad's there, they don't come home with the baby. So that whole thing, I can't even imagine how that felt
mm,
on the family, from mom and dad down to the other kids. It's unimaginable. Um, and mom not being equipped probably to deal with that, and not having a super nurturing, loving mother of her own. I don't know where she turned to. I don't know
mm,
who she turned to. I don't know how they dealt with it. So all this happened before I was ever born. And then
mm.
they're done. They're done. The golden child came. He was perfect. He was the savior. He was everybody's baby. Then,
He helped them forget about their grief.
yep, he did. He
Yeah.
helped them forget about their grief. And so there was born the golden child, the rainbow baby slash golden child. And then, you know, 17 months later, there's me. And it was like, okay, we didn't, I always imagine, and nobody's ever said,
Hmm.
man, when we found out we were pregnant with you, it was because the mom had the IUD and it went all the way up to the bladder or something. And I was never
Mm,
supposed to be here.
mm,
But you were such a pleasant surprise, and we
mm,
don't regret you at all. Say that now. Say that now.
mm.
But I put myself in mom's shoes and think, okay, I lost two, had one perfect one. What are the chances this one? We didn't plan this one anyway. We're already tapped out. We got 3 kids. Life is crazy. I didn't really want another one, but here we are. I always wonder about that, because she'll never
Mm,
be honest. She'll never be honest with me and say, oh, God,
mm,
yeah, I would. I'd say, oh, hell yeah. I was so stressed out. I'm like, what the hell am I going to do with another kid? We lost two. We got one. Blah, blah, blah. I would have been completely transparent, but I don't get any of that. So but I could put myself in their shoes and think, oh, I would have been freaked out. I would have been like, wait, the IUD went where? I'm not supposed to have another kid. We can't have another kid. Totally put myself in their shoes and think all of that stress probably flew into me through my mom because of the cortisol and all the chemicals flying through her, stressing out, wondering, is this baby going to be born alive? Am I going to miscarry? Holy crap. I can only imagine. So here I come. But then it's just funny how, without going too far, unless you want to, about later in life, just in the last so many years, I finally start figuring out the whole golden child thing, the whole, all this stuff. And I think, oh, that explains everything. For me to understand so many dynamics with the kid above me, and how things were so different with him as opposed to me, with how he was treated with everybody, including the siblings, more so the siblings, and think, oh, but then knowing I got a different set of parents than even he got, because he got the parents that were so elated they had a 9+ pound beautiful baby boy that was the rainbow baby that made everyone feel better because he was perfect when he was born, you know? So many different moving parts with how I've dove into trying to figure out all the questions to why. And there's too many to list. So anyway, there you go. This is Tiffany. Right?
This is Tiffany. Tiffany, I just really appreciate you being vulnerable and sharing, because those are some very deep feelings that you have, and some really hard things your family has gone through, the loss of, and you weren't there, but you clearly have felt the impact of it. I mean, that is a fact. I mean, you, frankly, how you described the loss, and you know, how that could have impacted, and we don't know because we weren't there, right? But we know, and we can imagine the empty arms walking into the house, the anticipation, right?
It upsets me just thinking about it.
Yeah.
And you know, they don't. I remember growing up, I remember having to go to the cemetery because her name was Terry Lynn. And I never understood any of it.
Yeah.
I didn't. I was like, why? Who is this person? They didn't really talk about it. My dad would say, you look so much like her when you were born.
Wow.
You know, you look so much like her when you were born. And it's heartbreaking, you know? It's truly heartbreaking to think about going full term.
Yeah.
After losing one already, and everybody's excited. There's a baby coming home. Just wait till we get home. The kids, you know, were there waiting, and then nothing. And so it's really heartbreaking to think about, but to not fully talk about it, and to not include the family that came after in that. Not that I want you to feel the heartache I felt, but I want to explain, this would have been your sister. This would have been your big sister. This would have been just to include me in that would have been nice, because I've always been left to my own, and thank God I have a huge imagination and a huge curiosity to have asked questions. But my mom, she doesn't want to talk about it. I understand it's painful. I understand that. But then even years and years, it took me, girl, it took me till I was in my late teens before I did the math and realized that they were 17 when Doug was born.
Right.
It took me that, because it was just not talked about. It was like, it's shame. It's based, my mother packs around shame like nobody I've ever met. And it's palatable sometimes. And I think there was one time, because I am very, you know, and I'm not mean and hateful. I just sit there and I go, one time I remember this so vividly. I said, wait, because I was doing the math on Doug's birthday and their anniversary and all this stuff. And I was like, and their age. And I go, wait, How old were you guys when you Well, I mean, I got it full board from her. It was like, "You don't ask those questions. This is
Mhm.
you." I mean, I can't remember what was said, but I was so taken aback and I thought, "What are you ashamed of? What
Mm.
That's life. I mean, look at this family. You have you by that time they had grandbabies and I mean, I
Mm.
was an aunt at 10. I was an aunt at 10 years old the first time. And so it was like, why would you be ashamed of life, this beautiful life that you have created with my dad? Now you have 4 kids, you got the grandbabies popping out. What is there to be ashamed of? But it was just based in such shame. And me with my wait, what? Wait, you were 17? It wasn't me going, "Oh, you Jezebel."
Mm.
I mean, it wasn't me sitting there judging, but you little whore, what are you doing at 16 years old? I mean, come on. She was doing the same thing at 16 that I was. Okay. I just didn't have anything happen. So, I mean, it's what's the problem? So that's what I was raised with is you
Mm.
don't talk about it. But I cannot imagine the pain that they went through having to deal with that loss and
Mm.
especially back to back losses like that.
Yeah. Yeah. It's just a fascinating, difficult situation. Um,
Yeah.
anytime there's any kind of a loss, it's just sad, frankly. And and people do handle it so differently. Some people do talk about it, some people do not talk about it. Some people talk about it later, some people never talk about it. I mean, there are so many different ways that people handle loss, and we've learned what works better than others for sure, right? But I don't know that there is any ideal way to handle the loss. I think what you talked about, though, is so classic of what we see. Because frankly, when parents go through traumatic grief, they enter this different type of emotional realm, right? And that is something that the whole family will feel, right? Even if you don't, it might be something you don't even see, but the nervous system feels it. The nervous system
Yeah.
might know, and it, because the family's always trying to resist change and trying to stay in this homeostasis state, right? And so that's why sometimes you don't talk about it, because then that shows that it's emotionally off. But guess what? Children, especially, they absorb those emotional burdens, they understand it. And it's really not just these, in a sense, ghosts that are happening, it's these patterns that they're experiencing, right? And
Yeah.
that it's like this earthquake just happened, and it just disrupts the whole family unit in so many different ways, and there's a
Yeah.
lot of things that can happen. Frankly, sometimes the parents think that they're, protecting the children by really not talking about it, just trying to move on and be normal. And sometimes that works. It is true. Sometimes that does work. I work with a
Wow.
lot of children that have been through trauma, and they don't want to talk about it. Young children will tell me
Yeah.
that they don't want to talk about it. They don't want to remember it. They just want to be normal. They just want to feel normal. So
Yeah.
I think it's just important, as we look at how people handle it, right? That we recognize that people handle it in the best way that they can, that we want to be careful about judging them, because we don't know what it was like. We don't know what it was like being in their shoes, and and what might have been the best. And again,
Yeah.
different people need different things. And I think that's really important to recognize. Some people do need to talk about it, and some people just need to feel normal.
Right.
And I'm just going to give you an example. You talked a lot about shame, and why should they feel shame? You're absolutely right. There is no reason. Everything that you just told me, they've got all these things to be proud about and feel
Yeah.
good about. But you know what? If that was their trauma and they were shamed because of being a young minor, being pregnant and having to start a family, right? If they were shamed because of that, that created trauma that probably stayed with them. And we tend to recognize that trauma feelings will come out when there's something similar when we're triggered again, right?
Right.
And it will come out. Even if I recovered from trauma, even if I'm feeling pretty good and I feel like I've moved on and I'm doing well, somebody could make one statement and then I can have those angst, those feelings that come forward. I can recognize
Right.
it is because of what I call, it's an emotional memory. It's a memory of the
Mm.
way that I felt then when somebody shamed me back then, right? And I
Yeah.
remember how bad that, because again, it lives in your body, right? So you remember how bad that feels, even though you're like, I'm good now. I recognize I'm good now. Life
Yeah.
is good. I've got wonderful kids. I've accomplished a lot. I've moved way past that, but that was a bad time. It maybe right in my life when I was basically shamed by other people. I was looked down. I embarrassed whatever my family, whatever the case may be. And so
Yeah.
I think that's important to recognize that we don't know. And so we have to be careful when we are making assumptions about what happened and
Right.
maybe why they did what they do or why they are the way they are now, right?
Yeah. Yes. When you were talking just now, I was thinking there was never a time that I can ever remember where I looked negatively at my parents
Mm,
for their life, for the fact that they were teenagers, living life and got pregnant, got married. I mean, we're talking 66 years or something. It's just like, you got nothing to be ashamed of. Holy
no,
cow.
absolutely.
Nothing, and it's just,
However, it doesn't
I
mean that
never felt
they weren't shamed previously,
right.
right? I
Right.
mean,
I
it's
I
great that
guarantee
you're
you that
that
that's
way.
part of it.
Yeah.
Yep. Yep. And it's funny that was the first thing that my mother
Mm,
reacted to when I did mention
mm.
that, cuz I can joke with pretty much anybody, but not her.
She's
I'm
just
not kidding
serious.
you.
She's
She
serious.
is she is she reacts. She will it just makes me laugh because I don't know why. It's like, do you not know me by now? Do you not realize that I am not a malicious, hateful, disrespectful turd? Do you not realize, because every now and then, just like the other day, what I don't even know what was said, but it was so
Mm.
dumb. And then she goes, "Don't you have somewhere to go?" And I was like, "What is the problem? Well, don't you have somewhere to be?" That's what she said. "Don't you need to go to Nevada? Don't you need to go home for a while?" Mom, what is your problem? Blah, 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 blah. Because
She was clearly annoyed
I
with you at
just,
that point.
oh,
For
girl,
reason.
it never ends. She is annoyed with me most of the time. And it's so funny because the dynamics between her and I, and
Mm,
everybody knows this that knows me or even listens to this and doesn't know me at all. They're like, I get it. You've said it 1,000 times, but it never ceases to blow me away
mm,
at I can joke with my dad and he just laughs and it's like we get along so good. And then if mom says something that I think is funny and or I'm saying something that is funny and it's not directed at her. It's not like, well, I'm just gonna pick it's just like, where did that come from? Don't you have somewhere to go? I look at her and I go, where did that come from? Because my personality is I don't take any shit. I just don't. It's not like, look, and
You're
I
pretty,
answer for everything
you're
is,
directive, Tiffany. Really? I didn't know that about you.
yeah, you're like, what? What? Okay. That's a shocker, right? But I'm not mean and malicious and hateful. It's like
No, right. There's a
I have
difference. There's a
clear,
difference between being
yeah,
direct and assertive and being aggressive and mean.
right, right. And it's
Yeah.
funny because she hates it. It just never ends. Even in her state of decline, meaning, mental decline and all that,
Mm,
and all the stuff that I have to do and dad has to do, and everybody that is involved, well, there's not everybody, there's a few. There's always people that have to do things for her. And it's funny because you think, shouldn't you be more grateful? You know?
mm.
Shouldn't you be more grateful? Maybe. I don't know. Just a thought. And not be like, don't you have somewhere to go? Don't you need to go somewhere? Okay. Yeah. Oh, yeah. There's places I could be. Trust me. There's places I'd like to be. Trust me. But
That's a classic. That's
but
a
I'm here and
classic.
I'm making dinner.
That's right. And that is a classic caregiver's scenario right there for sure. Especially when you start seeing the cognitive
Yeah.
decline and you don't really get the appreciation that you should be getting. That is just a fact. It's kind of across the board,
Night and
unfortunately.
day.
Yeah. Yeah.
And my dad is just the opposite. My dad, he can't thank me enough nonstop. It's like, Daddy, you already thanked me 6 times. It's fine. I love
Mm.
you. I'm here to help. I made them burgers a couple nights ago. Oh, honey. Oh, thank you so much. Oh, he is getting sweeter and sweeter by the second.
That's
And,
awesome.
and it's just, he'll never be the guy that has dementia that's going to turn into the combative turd. It's just not happening. So he's just sweeter and sweeter and sweeter, and the hugs are more and
Oh,
more and more, and you just go, yeah.
oh,
Anyway, but
wow.
what I wanted to talk a little bit more about was I wanted your take on my parents' lineage. I'll just give you like a
Mm.
rundown
Yeah.
and just to kind of explain a little more. And you mentioned earlier about having more understanding and empathy for people
Mhm.
like my mother who never were they were she was never given the right tools to to be to I guess to feel safe, secure, understood, valued. I think back then, her parents, her mom and dad divorced, and then she had half siblings, step siblings. On that side, my dad's the same thing, but his dad was murdered by his uncle, if you can believe that. It's
Oh,
Arkansas, crazy
what?
stuff. So
What?
yeah, murdered by my grandma's brother, and they came from Arkansas out this
Oh
way
my.
through Washington to Idaho.
Wow.
You don't leave the family, but you back up, and her dad killed himself in front of everybody
Mm.
with rat poison. So then you
Oh,
carry this, her husband gets murdered. My dad's just a baby. He's literally like a brand new baby. My 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 dad's uncle follows them out here to Idaho, tracks him down, kills my dad's dad, slashes up my grandma and an aunt, and then he spends years
oh
and
my
years in prison. But
gosh.
yet, it's just crazy. So my dad was born
Serious
into trauma,
trauma. Yeah, serious
100%
trauma.
born into trauma. Can't
Oh
even
my.
imagine what it was like. And my aunt, his older sister, was already born, but it's just crazy. So then my grandma remarries a World War II veteran who had half his hand blown off. My grandpa Casey
Oh
was
my.
like this much of his hand. And when he'd get mad, he'd go like this. And he was a chain smoker. He'd smoke like this.
Oh.
Anybody that knew Casey knew the guy was a character, but he was filled with a lot of rage, and he had
Mm.
been blown up. He was
Yeah.
a vet, a tattered vet, and never talked about any of the stuff, but was abusive and
Mm.
pretty rageful back in the day, and then grew into this adorable older man that I got, like the same thing.
Mm.
They got this Casey, I got
Mm.
this Casey, and I freaking loved my grandpa. He was
Mm.
absolutely nuts in a good way, and I loved him so much because he was unhinged and had no fear of anything. So he was amazing. But my dad didn't get that amazing, from
Mm.
him until much later in life. So, but it's just so much to pack, and not to mention the young father, the losing two babies, all that stuff. My dad just packed so much stuff, and he became the sweet, kind people
Mm.
pleaser to just keep the peace. He is
Mm.
the way he is because he just wanted everyone to be happy and keep the peace, including his wife, including, the son that betrayed him and all this stuff. He just, well, that's my son. Well, that's my wife. Well, that's my dad. And always making excuses for bad behavior
Mm.
and disrespect. And so I saw that. Let's flip down to what I saw
Mm.
my in my life, watching him keep the peace and be so kind and loving and people crapping on him. I naturally became the caretaker for him and the protector for him. and being the last born and all of that. It's like, oh, nobody's gonna mess with my dad. I don't care who you are. It could be my mom, my grandpa, my brother. I don't care. You're not gonna mess with my dad. And so that's where I naturally took that in. But on the other side, my mom's family was, her her mom's dad killed himself in the Burns, Oregon
Oh,
jail cell, hung himself there.
oh
He's buried in
man.
Burns. So, and then grandma,
Wow.
there's very little info about my mom's family. She doesn't know anything. She doesn't talk about it. If she knows
Mm,
it, very little. I don't know diddly do about any of them, honestly, really very little. And, everybody had bars. Her dad ended up, probably shouldn't say it, but he married somebody else, and then he died of
mm,
cancer and all the, I mean,
mm,
it's just like kids, step half whole, such chaos, but never equipped with anything. She just was given money and ran the streets. Like, here,
mm,
run along. Here's money. Go play
mm,
in the freeway. so the only thing she ever could tell you is how much she loved dad from the day she was
mm,
born. That's pretty much all
mm,
you get from my mom. So
mm,
you just have this collide of so much generational trauma brought into then their own trauma. And then it's no wonder, there's so much lack of the ability to function emotionally, to discern certain things, to communicate, to be open, to be vulnerable, to, just very, very interesting. And I mentioned the last time you and I spoke about how I'm pretty sure there's not any major deep, deep conversation that goes on
mm,
in that house because they're just not equipped for a lot of really deep diving and deep conversation, even in the midst of all the pain of being betrayed by their youngest son uh,
mm,
3.5 years ago. I don't even know if they ever really truly talked about it, about
mm,
the pain and how awful
mm,
that felt and regret or whatever, just talk about
mhm.
it. So all I can say without going any further on that is that I believe that,
Wow.
yeah, right.
A lot. It's a lot.
I'm just glad that I was born when I was born. That's all I can say.
That's a good thing to be happy about. Yes.
I am. I am. I can't imagine being the others because it's the it's very similar. Very,
Mm,
very similar in the lack of communication, ability to dive deep, ability to ask questions, ability to be there, to be present, to be vulnerable, to be real, to be honest. All these things that I see that isn't there. And a lot of the golden child enabling crap that happened with the brother that betrayed my family or my
mm,
parents is born out of the coddling and
mm,
the fact that they kind of worshiped him, for a long
mm,
time. And that brings about that type of kid that ends up doing what he wants to do, making his own
mm,
decisions at a young age, never doing anything wrong, never being held accountable, never being questioned, never having boundaries. And so therefore addiction comes in, uh, the you're not going to tell me what to do ever kind of thing. And nobody ever did. Nobody ever did.
mm,
So I am just grateful that I was born last to be
mm,
able to see this all for what it really is and be willing to be vulnerable and raw and learn and grow and help turn that back out into potentially being able to help other people and have these conversations with you and learn more from you and just everything that I look towards to try to help me answer questions all the time. I am so grateful. I can't imagine being any other way where you bury your head in the sand and never talk and never uh, and never be real. It just doesn't compute for me at all.